Welcome, everyone. My name is Suzanne. I work here at the Career Center as the Faculty and Staff Engagement Coordinator, and this is our fourth faculty and staff training that we've done this semester, and we really appreciate you showing up today and being interested in this topic. We have two amazing campus professionals, Lance and Savannah, who will be with us today, talking about research opportunities and how to get your students more engaged with research on campus. With that, I'm going to allow both of them to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started.
So hello, everybody. My name is Lance Barton. As Suzanne said, I am the new director here over in the Office of Undergraduate Research. So this week I celebrated my 5 months on campus, so I am still relatively new. But we're making some exciting changes over here in OUR, and I'm excited to share a little bit with you some of the things that we're working on and some of the ideas that we have looking forward.
Hi, my name is Savannah Lake. I'm the Digital Scholarship Librarian at Atkins Library, and I support a lot of our research services and our open access publishing services, and very excited to talk about how undergraduate students can take advantage of those.
Thank you so much. So Lance, we're going to hand it over to you, and thank you so much for talking about this topic with us today.
Sure. So thank you very much. I'm excited to talk about this idea of career readiness, largely as it focuses with undergraduate research and the intersections that we see. So I'm going to start out with some data that I'm assuming probably if you've been to some of the other trainings with career services, you may be familiar with, which is this idea of what are sort of employers looking for. And these data come from the National Association of Colleges and Employers, or NACE, which is the sort of guiding group for career services professionals. And as you look down this list, you can see, right, a lot of employers are looking for potential employees and candidates with problem-solving skills, analytical skills, ability to work as a team, like the collaborative skills, communication skills, and the list goes on and on. But those top 5 or 6 right there, obviously, if you have any experience with undergraduate research, or if you've worked with students in the past on projects, or you've been involved in your own research projects, right, you understand that these are key skills that are associated with research. Moreover, if we go beyond NACE, we're going to find a continuing theme. And so I also include sort of a list from AAC&U, which is the American Association of Colleges and Universities. Their study they did an initial study in 2013 with CEOs and followed it up with a study in 2018 with hiring managers. And they asked them, as part of the LEAP project, which is Liberal Education and America's Promise project, what were the skills that they were looking for in potential hires that were lacking in college graduates, as a way to kind of rethink and refocus what we're doing in terms of higher education. And again, we see a lot of the same components: collaboration, problem solving, effective communication, thinking outside the box, being creative, right? And being comfortable with this idea of new knowledge, new skills, areas that are not well defined. And yet they say that college graduates are lacking this, which is interesting and fascinating to me. I've been over 20 years in higher education as a faculty member, and now as an administrator. And I know that we're teaching these things and we're working with students on these skills. So what is it that is, sort of missing in translation? So more recently, NACE, again, went on to kind of take all of these different skills that employers are looking for and group them into different categories. And so NACE came up with 8 different categories, or competencies, that are associated with career readiness to help inform higher education. And you can see their career and self-development, communication, critical thinking, equity and inclusion, leadership, professionalism, technology, and teamwork. And here at UNC Charlotte, Career Services has partnered with Student Affairs, I believe, to create this really nice competency compass, where students can sort of assess and kind of take a look at what they're doing and what activities might help them develop skills in these areas. Okay? And that's a really valuable tool that, if you haven't explored, definitely want to steer you to it. I feel like I should get a job in career services the way I'm going, but apparently I listened to Patrick. I guess it shows. But more importantly, I think from our standpoint over on the right is a visualization. The bar graph is to represent in blue, right, that emphasis of importance. So when we take these individual skills, categorize them into the 8 groups, how important are these for employers? versus in purple, how proficient are they seeing the candidates? And what you can see is there's some pretty large gaps in critical thinking, communication, professionalism, for example, and even leadership and career and self-development. And what I'll emphasize is that undergraduate research can directly relate to these areas where we have gaps. And so if we can broaden access to undergraduate research and think a little bit more intentionally about how we instruct our students using research pedagogies, that we can, again, I think, close these gaps and help students be able to articulate more clearly as graduates why they have the skills that employers are looking for. So a nice piece, a white paper, a position paper written by Jean Mikolajczyk through the Council on Undergraduate Research really addressed these 8 competency areas and sets of skills and tied them specifically to undergraduate research. So again, if we look across them, problem solving and critical thinking, right? That is at the heart of research. So if undergraduates are getting experience in that, they're going to be more proficient and have some skills in these areas. Oral and written communication. If we think about students presenting their work, sharing their ideas, that's going to be key there. Teamwork and collaboration, particularly at the undergraduate scale, research is mentored, and they're oftentimes working in teams or at least communicating with a mentor and working through that idea of being able to share ideas and use other people's information to refine their own ideas. Professionalism, leadership, we can continue on down through this list and really tie these to undergraduate research very effectively. And so I would like to make the case that undergraduate research is one of the best tools that we have as educators in order to help fill these perceived skill gap areas amongst students. So what is it about undergraduate research that fills this so nicely? Well, as I said, it aligns with most of these skill sets. But if we see this sort of diagram here from the USF Library, University of San Francisco, we see undergraduate research is sort of at this heart of a variety of different experiences that students may encounter during their college careers. It helps them develop a sense of community. It helps them understand gain a deeper understanding of their education and the contextual pieces of it. It oftentimes can give them purpose to their education. It is experiential by its nature. It helps students with resiliency. It helps students learn how to fail. I always used to tell my students, I'm a biologist, and I always say that, the best hypothesis, the one when you learn something, is when you're wrong. Because when you collect data and prove that your idea is wrong, it's the closest we have to being sure of anything. If my data support my hypothesis, I'm always questioning, well, what am I missing? Or what didn't I test? Or what didn't I control for? Or how could I refine my experiment? But when I know I'm wrong, I've truly learned something. But students aren't comfortable, oftentimes aren't used to that sort of being wrong, desiring to be wrong, wanting to be wrong, right? And using it as a learning tool. Also, research helps us build networks, right? The opportunity to communicate our research, interact with different professionals, and that can open up doors for letters of reference, finding opportunities, all kinds of things. So there are lots of ways in which undergraduate research is sort of a confluence between a variety of different key components in higher education that helps students address this sort of competency gap or develop the skills that make them highly desirable and highly employable. And so a few of those are listing there, right? Deep understanding, active role in inquiry, improved communication skills, being able to think creatively, right? And creating this network and being comfortable in that area of unknown. And I can't emphasize that enough, because most of us were taught through a K through 12 system that oftentimes is focused on finding the right answer and having that validation. And a lot of times, historically, higher education classes were structured the same way. Work on this pre-existing knowledge that's out there, read the textbook, whatever it is, and show me that you have it mastered, you have the right answer. And that's a very different skill set, a very different mindset for students, that when they're in a situation where they look to the mentor and go, did I do it right? And the mentor is like, I don't know. We don't know what the right answer is, right? We are creating new knowledge. And to impart to students at that moment, when they come up with a new idea, when they have a new piece of data, when they've finished a survey, when they've created something, at that moment in time, I always like to emphasize to students, at that moment in time, you are the sole person on the face of the earth that knows that. Think about how exciting that can be when you put it into that context. You're the only person in the world who knows that right now. And then you're going to go and you're going to share it. You're going to tell your mentor. You're going to tell your peers. You're going to make a poster. You're going to give a talk. You're going to put your creative work on display. You're going to do whatever it is, and you're going to share that. And that's sort of in this world that we live in where we can grow that knowledge. And to be honest, right, if we think about the work that we do, very few of us are doing work that is exclusively, and I would argue probably the minority of the work that I do, is dealing with the known, where I already know what the answer to the problem is, right? What we're doing is work where we don't know what the right answer is. We're dealing with ambiguity. And to help our students feel more comfortable with that, I think is a real strength of undergraduate research. And so in order to think about undergraduate research in that sort of important role of developing what I'll call those sort of professional skills, I think we have to take a moment back and think about what is undergraduate research. There are a lot of different definitions out there. I'm sure if I polled this group, I may even get a couple of different definitions. So I'm actually going to share the definition that is used by the Council for Undergraduate Research, and it defines undergraduate research as a mentored investigation or creative inquiry conducted by an undergraduate student, and I always like to say mentored by a professional in the discipline, that seeks to make a scholarly or artistic contribution to knowledge. So again, that goal is new knowledge, okay, whatever form that takes. But what they're doing is they're engaging in the research cycle, which we see over there on the right, which is to look, observe, think, ask questions, right? Go, why don't we have a solution to this problem? Or how can we make this process better? Or has anybody thought of this? Has anybody looked at this? Why don't we know that? I used to, when I was teaching, students would ask me lots of questions in biology. Well, why does it work that way? And I would just simply go, evolution? That's my default answer, because why questions are hard to understand and it takes a lot of research. And so when you have those questions, right, it's fostering that idea that we don't know everything, right, and that it's worth investigating. So then you investigate, you gather information, you analyze data, you collect data, you design experiments, you build surveys, you talk to people, whatever it is, you read in order to collect the information, and then you communicate it, right? Because closing that loop on the research cycle is communicating, getting feedback, refining the ideas, and starting the process again. Okay? And so when we are engaging students in this role as undergraduates, right, I want to emphasize at the heart of this is that it is a pedagogical approach. Right? It is fundamentally pedagogy to which we are engaged as teachers and learners, because the mentor has an absolutely key role in that process with the student. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the mentoring model that we use in the OUR Scholars, because it ties very closely to these NACE competencies and sort of developing the skills. And that is that we're going to start with developing mentoring agreements anytime we have students working together with a faculty or staff member on a research project. That mentoring agreement is going to define a lot of the sort of professional skills, right? Help the students with professionalism, help the students with career and self-development areas. And during that process of establishing how's communication going to work, what's this process going to look like, the students and the mentors also select a series of skills, right? With a goal that the research experience will have intentional skill building. So if we look at this model for mentoring over off to the right, the mentor is involved in a wide variety of different processes with the student, including development of hard skills, soft skills, idea development, right? And also supporting the logistics for the student. So if we think about that in terms of skill development, we ask that the mentoring teams focus on skills that are associated with those NACE competencies. So we've developed a series of 16 student learning outcomes that the mentoring teams will pick from. So I have an example here. First, we have this idea of critical thinking. So this is the part in bold. So this is one of the NACE competency categories, right? And then a student learning outcome here underlined: to gather and analyze information from a diverse set of sources to fully understand a problem. So this is a concrete skill within that sort of category. And we've taken the remaining 7 other additional NACE competencies, and we've developed a set of 16 SLOs. I'm not going to read them all to you, nor do I expect you to read them all, as this goes through relatively quickly. But as Suzanne mentioned, we'll make this available. Happy to share the slides and share this information out through OUR as well. But it's based around the 8, we have basically 2 student learning outcomes across each of the 8 competency areas. And what this does is it helps the students and the mentors establish early on what are some goals. They're not, these are not the only 4 things students are going to get out of the research experience, but what are some ways in which the research experience will help the students be marketable, hireable, and impact their educational trajectory. Once we've established those student learning outcomes, the goal is that hopefully the faculty member or the mentor will reiterate some of these key pieces during the research experience. OUR will also provide professional development workshops that reinforce skill building across these different areas with some intentional instruction for the students. The students then have an opportunity to publicly present their research, right? That is yet another opportunity to learn, where they are, if we think about how powerful a learning technique, right, presenting a poster is, for example, I pick poster because it's one of the few times where you get to give a presentation, receive immediate feedback from your audience, and then the next person walks up and you do it again, right? And in a relatively compressed amount of time, you give that presentation 5, 6, 7 times maybe, right? So imagine how much better that last presentation is at the end of the session compared to the very first one when they started, because they're getting that real-time feedback. So that is absolutely a chance to learn, and also a chance to show learning throughout the semester. And at the end of the term, we'll ask the mentors and the students to reflect back on their experiences and to complete assessments focused around the student learning outcomes. So they only pick 4 of the 16 at the beginning. Those same 4 come back at the end, asking them to reflect on what specific structures helped you in this skill area. What specific areas of growth do you see in yourself for the students in this area, or what do you see in your mentee? Okay. And so this is how we're approaching the mentoring model, how we're approaching sort of connecting undergraduate research with this sort of direct articulation, using the same language that employers are using to help students be able to express that they do have these skills, that they are competent in these areas, and that they hopefully will be desirable and marketable as potential employees. But I will take a moment here to ask, right, what about moving beyond the lab, the studio, the office, the apprenticed model, and encourage folks to think a little bit about what we can do in terms of undergraduate research. Because if we subscribe, and I'm not sure that all of you necessarily, took my Kool-Aid straight down that undergraduate research is a pedagogy, but if we think about it in that way, and we think about research skills as being highly transferable and applicable to a wide variety of careers, and that the apprentice opportunity, the ability to do undergraduate research, is absolutely transformative. The problem is that doing one-on-one undergraduate research where we pair an individual student with an individual mentor every time is resource intensive, it's time intensive, and it has very limited reach. And so it becomes a question of scope and scale. How do we begin to expand access to this mentoring model? And how do we think maybe a little bit more about the instructor as a mentor? And really, are the roles of the instructor and the mentor necessarily that different? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about ways in which I think we can incorporate undergraduate research into core courses, into disciplinary and general education curriculum in ways that may help people envision this in a slightly different way. And again, spread that articulation of those skills to a broader group of students. Oops. So if we think about undergraduate research for a moment, as a pedagogy, I'm going to push it on sort of thinking about it in the traditional IDM model for education, right? An introduction, development, and a mastery. And so we've got a little rubric here across the side here, right, from basic, beginning, developing, competent, mature, and exemplary, right? Something that we might use to kind of evaluate student work. And historically, when we think about skill building, we've thought of that in terms of the novice, the apprentice, the journeyman, and the master. But we can also think about it in context of class years. I see one of the questions is, right, when do we start students in research? Well, as soon as we can would be my sort of quick answer, and it gets a little more elaborate as we explore that and unpack it, is freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, right? We want them to be developing their skills and continue over time. So how are we introducing, developing, and mastering these skills? And I would argue that the best way to do this would be an early introduction to the curriculum with then deliberate developmental assignments that help build the skills and help the students develop their research proficiency. And so what are the ways in which we can do this? So with thinking about it from a pedagogical standpoint, right, there are different ways in which the classroom can sort of take appearance. We can have a student-focused classroom, or we can have a teacher-focused classroom. So this might be traditionally the active learning versus the sage on the stage lecture. We can have one that emphasizes research content. These are the people, this is what they learned, this is how they learned it, right? Or we can have an emphasis on process and problems and having students engage in that. I would say the gold standard, if we want students to be proficient in skill development, is to try and move towards a student-focused emphasis on process. So that's this research-based quadrant up here. Now, that is not to mean that there's not a role for research-tutored, research-led, and research-oriented courses, because again, it's a developmental model. How do we introduce it? How do we develop it? How do we master the skills? And so if we can push opportunities towards research-based courses, I think we can provide a lot of opportunities for a lot of students in a more diverse way. And so one of the ways in which we do this is called a cure. So cures have been known for a long time in the sciences. It's a scientific term for course-based undergraduate research experiences. They're just kind of now starting to catch on outside of that area. So I like this diagram here from the Cell Biology Science Education Journal, which is a little more recent, which talks about this idea of inquiry versus discovery-based inquiry versus a true cure. And what we can see is at the center of this, where they're all overlapping, is this idea of a focus on skills, focus on collaboration, focus on opportunity for students to make mistakes, to learn from those mistakes and build from them. And then, depending on where you are on this spectrum, right, you might be incorporating other components, and the degree to which you are dealing with the unknown also affects sort of where you are. And what the authors of this particular piece argued was that broadly relevant research that has meaning beyond the classroom, something that might be community engaged or something that might fit into a bigger picture project, is what really distinguishes sort of that cure experience for students, that you're working in the unknown with something that other people care about, but you're allowing students in your classroom to engage in that process. So the advantages to this model is that the students develop independence and the mastery of skills over time. The curriculum integration allows a greater impact, more than the apprentice model can do. The advantage for faculty and staff, but particularly faculty, is the sort of double dip across the teaching research service triumvirate, right, and how this aligns. The opportunity to publish the models, to test projects that might be worth exploring, other things like that, that has real benefit in terms of thinking about R1 status, for example. And the curriculum integration allows the students to be effectively guided in their development because the mentor is there at each step of the process. So I'll encourage you to kind of think a little bit, maybe outside the box. I hopefully tried to emphasize today how we see undergraduate research really fitting with the career competencies, how we see undergraduate research as absolutely an essential part of a Charlotte education, but also challenge you in ways to think, beyond just the 10 or 20 students, right, that are a small group that might be the honors thesis students or might be the OUR scholars in the summer. How do we begin to engage a broader, more diverse population of students, which has multiple access points to help students? Are they coming in as first years? Are they coming in as transfer students? Do they have course experience? Do they not have course experience? But an early and often approach that does start them thinking in this process to get them comfortable, right? Certainly, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but for me personally, I did not go to graduate school without research experience. I had multiple undergraduate research experiences, so I had a little understanding. That does not mean when I got to graduate school that my PI dropped me in the lab and said, go cure cancer or whatever it was, right? There's a lot of mentoring, a lot of guidance there, and there was a lot of learning to be had, a lot of mistakes to make. And the earlier that we can start this process and help students, I think the better. And because research skills are so transferable, and that we'll use those skills regardless whether they go to graduate school, medical school, whether they go to an employer, whether they're working in finance, right? Whatever it is, whether they're starting a company, being an entrepreneur, they're using the same skill set. So we can build this for success, but it's worth it to be intentional. It's worth it to point out those student learning outcomes. It's worth it to talk about these skills in the context of that career competency and that career compass, and that NACE framework, right? Because then the students are talking about it, they're hearing it from multiple sources the same way. Then they can talk about it when they interview, and the employers know that, that they have the skills that they're looking for. And I really want to emphasize one of the things that people talk to me all about all the time when I propose these ideas about focusing on process is, well, what is the content I'm going to give up? What is the content I'm going to give up? And one of the things that I always come back to them is with two pieces is, one, I can honestly say that the vast majority, it's not even close, right, of students do not remember the information that I gave them from intro cell biology to, sophomore cell biology, for example, or from Gen Chem to OChem, or history 163 to history 262, right? They just don't remember the content. Plus, the other thing that I will emphasize is that what we just saw from what is important to be hireable, what do employers feel like college graduates are missing? There were no technical skills on that list. They were the professional skills, right? They were the skills that make somebody a good collaborator, make someone that you want to work with, that makes them adaptable. Now, I will give the caveat, AAC and ULEAP survey did identify one technical skill. So if you're going to teach them technical skill, it's proficiency in Excel, because that's the one thing that technical skill that employers say that college graduates lack. So teach them Excel, and then spend some time working on process. And hopefully, I think that this undergraduate research can be a tool for recruitment, retention within the colleges, within the university. But we have to move about it with this idea that there is no one-size-fits-all model, and we need to think about undergraduate research in different ways. So I hope that I've stimulated you to think a little bit about this. If you found this interesting, or you are interested in having more conversations like this, I want to make a short plug. I won't plug Career Services for Change, I'll plug OUR. OUR is going to start a faculty learning community. We've identified a couple of faculty fellows who will be leading that community starting in the new year. And we're in the process of just starting to begin recruitment for participants at this stage. And that is going to run through this spring and then through next year with hopefully some deliverables in 2025. So if you find this interesting and you're interested, we'd love to have you be part of our community. So if you would like to follow up with OUR, you're interested, we are located in Barnard 109. That's a new office for us this year. And we do have regular drop-in hours. You can send your students to us if they have questions. You can find us, students can find us on Niner Engage, you can find us on Instagram. We have lots of information on our webpage. I really encourage faculty to subscribe to our Google Calendar. We put all of our deadlines, all of our events, and materials up there. So we will be kicking off our recruitment for summer projects here before the end of the month. And we'll start recruiting faculty projects and start talking about and thinking about summer. And we'll be recruiting students at the beginning of the spring semester. So pretty much the month of February, we will spend recruiting students to hopefully make a bunch of matches for the summer. But we are excited this spring. We do have 57 scholars participating this spring, one of our the largest academic year semester cohort that we've had. And they represent all of the colleges but one. So I think that's 7 or 8 colleges we have faculty and student representatives from. So we're excited to be working with your students. We're excited to work with you, and happy to, answer questions or yield at least to Savannah, and then answer maybe questions afterwards.
Thank you so much, Lance. Feel free to continue to put your questions in the chat. I also did put the link for undergraduate education in the chat as well, so you can click on that, as well as Lance's and Savannah's information, so you can email them directly. All right, with that, Savannah, it's all you.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much, everyone. I'm excited here to talk about a resource we have on campus to help students with undergraduate research and also with career planning and career competencies. And this resource is called Niner Commons. Niner Commons is UNC Charlotte's institutional repository. So what that essentially means is if you're affiliated with the campus, so if you're a faculty member, if you're a student, if you're a staff member, and you're creating scholarship, you can post that to this website in order for it to get a larger reach and also in order for it to be preserved for the long term. So that means, if you're writing journal articles, if you're presenting at conferences, if you're writing book chapters, white papers, those sort of things, you can post that on this website. And as far as its key benefits, really it is discovery and its preservation. So as far as discovery, Niner Commons is indexed by Google Scholar. So that means that once it's on this website, people who are interested in your research topic, if they're in Google Scholar, they'll be able to find your work, engage with it. And then the other key benefit is access. So this repository is an archival level repository. This means that we have folks at the library who are supporting it that are digital archivists, they're metadata librarians, it's IT staff. The key goal here really is that once you put something in here, you'll always be able to find it. So if in 5, 10, 15 years, you're no longer at UNC Charlotte, it's not a problem. Anything that you've put in here, you'll be able to still access and share with others. So when we're thinking about undergraduate students, there's a lot of engagement already with undergraduate students and Niner Commons, and the type of scholarship we've seen them typically submit include conference posters and papers. A lot of the students who participate in the conferences with the Office of Undergraduate Research, they also post a copy of their poster within Niner Commons as well to give it that better reach in order for them to access it later. Other types of research that students have been posting in Niner Commons include honors theses, capstone projects, students who are in a research lab, for example, if they're a co-author on an article with a faculty member, they can put that in Niner Commons as well. The one caveat to keep in mind is that because this is an archival repository and what we're working towards is really long-term preservation and access, we're not able to host kind of works that are kind of routine classwork, so like a class essay or stuff like that. It really kind of, this list here is a good picture of the type of research products that we do host for undergraduate students. But it's certainly not a limiting list. If there are, other sort of scholarly output that students are interested in depositing, we've had them reach out to us and work something out. For example, we had a graduate student who did a video documentary that we're hosting within the repository. We've had an undergraduate class who put out a podcast that we're hosting as well. So we're, definitely encouraging students to use this. And then just as a side note for graduate students, all theses and all dissertations are automatically added to the repository. So how does Niner Commons support undergraduate research and also thinking through career competencies and life after UNC Charlotte? We have found that this has been an especially helpful tool for students who are pursuing a career in research and for students who are applying for graduate school. But honestly, any student, can really benefit from using Niner Commons as a service in this way. The first kind of use case I'll talk about is kind of for a job hunt, using Niner Commons to showcase what your research output looks like. So within the repository, as part of our commitment to long-term preservation and access, each object receives a permalink. So that means it is reliable and stable in the long term. I know even with this recent transition from uncc.edu to charlotte.edu, kind of things got lost in the process. Not anything in Niner Commons that's still good to go because we have these permalinks. So what this means is that, students who submit their work, they can actually update their CV with links to their work to actually showcase what their work product looks like, showcase what their research interests are directly with employers. So especially if you're thinking about employers who are more research focused, having a CV where you can actually see what their research product is makes that case so much more compelling and strong. And the real benefit of the permalinks is that once you do this to your CV, it's done for the long term. So if you're trying to share links to Google Drive or to even your own personal website, Google Drive folders can change, domains can go out. So this is really a one and done solution. And just so you can kind of get a sense of what this could look like, this is my personal professional portfolio I created in grad school when I was searching for jobs, and I've kept the resume part updated. What you can see here in this section for scholarship, if you're publishing in journal articles and that have DOIs, you already have a permalink that's stable there. So, you can use that. But really, for some of these research output, like a conference poster that isn't formally published, this is where Niner Commons can be a great help. So depositing it there and then adding the permalink here is a way to show employers what the actual work product is. Like, the citation is helpful, especially if they understand kind of the context and scope of the conference you presented it at. That's also helpful. But by including that link, you can actually see the poster itself. So it's a really great way to strengthen the resume for the long term. And in addition to the actual PDF that folks can look at and download, you also get a description of the work. So this includes, where it was presented, an abstract, some keywords, and then right here is that permalink. And similarly, even for the journal articles, if you wanted to, obviously, not every employer is going to have a subscription to all of these journals. So if you are publishing in places that aren't open access and you still want the employer to actually see the work, let's say this one, for example, we only have access because we have institutional access through UNC Charlotte, but an employer might not be able to see the full article. That's something you can easily work with me, and I can help you evaluate the right situation and what you're able to deposit within Niner Commons. So this one, for example, you are able to deposit the accepted manuscript, which is substantively the exact same text as what's in the full journal article. So I have that right here. So this is something that you could even put the permalink right here to ensure that employers are able to really engage and understand with your work. The other kind of use case I mentioned was academia, and this is just to say that institutional repositories like Niner Commons are a very common practice within academia. It's part of scholarly communication. So engaging with that, using these signals to folks that you're conversant in what scholarly communication practices are within academia, that you'll be able to make that transition fairly easily. So it's a great kind of best practice to do, especially in preparing, for a life of research in academia. So how this actually works, if you go to Niner Commons, it's super easy. You just click submit work, and all you have to do is share your contact information, upload the file. There's this license agreement here that you click agree to. It's fairly standard. It essentially says that you haven't plagiarized it, and you haven't put personal information in there like social security numbers, things like that. And then you click submit. So folks are able to submit to the site generally within under 2 minutes, but I'm always available for help with submitting or for evaluating rights situations like I showed with the journal article. That's it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Savannah. Does anyone have questions? Feel free to turn on your microphone or list them in the chat.